Hello and welcome and happy new year. Special presentation from the In the Money Players podcast. This is our annual Eclipse Awards show. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, coming to you from the Little House on the East Side in Saratoga. And joining us as he has done for the past several of these Eclipse Award shows, we bring in a man in some warmer climes than what we're dealing with here in freezing and wet, but not yet snowy Saratoga from Southern California. It's Jay Privman. Jay, what's going on?
Hey, good morning. Happy New Year. It's California cold, though, for us, Pete. It was 42 here when I woke up this morning, which I know is probably like the high where you guys are, but for us, it's, it's chilly.
Did you have the full parka on and the hat and everything?
I call it California cold. Yeah. We're grading on a curve.
Also joining us today from across town, a man who's familiar with the fake cold of places. Actually, I guess in Texas, sometimes it gets real cold, but often the fake cold of places like Texas and California, but now dealing with this stuff with me over there on the other. You're also on the east side, but just a bit south of the Little House here. Jonathon Kinchen, what's up, JK?
Yeah, look, I mean, people always talk about the cold. I grew up in Texas where it gets obnoxiously hot, and it's the same approach. You dress appropriately and you stay inside, and if you do that for the hot or the cold, you'll be just fine. So I don't do too much gallivanting around outside when it gets chilly.
I'm impressed that you reported in for work today, Jonathon. Sometimes these life events get in the way and mess up your schedule sort of famously on these shows. I was worried about when I saw that Texas did not win last night. I had gone to bed at halftime, happy that the over was in the books, thanks to Chris Felica and the Bear Bets podcast for lots of good ideas betting these New Year's Day games. But you're reporting in for work. You're undaunted.
Nah, I mean, it's disappointing. They had a good year and still, made too many mistakes last night. You can't turn the football over. It's one of the cardinal sins of football, and they did it. And two drives too that they were actually moving the football and turned it over. So they had a chance at the end and didn't pull it off. So it's part of it, I guess, right?
Nothing to second guess or complain about for you. You're just accepting the victory as found a better team on the night overall.
Yeah, no, Washington played extremely well, and like I said, they turned it over a few times. Texas did in inopportune times, and still had a chance at the end. So it's one of those deals where I'm glad the program seems to kind of be back in the light it needs to be, in the direction it needs to be going in. We kind of fell out of that in the last 10 years, so that's the positive I'll take from it.
Good, entertaining games, both. I'll say that much as a non-hardcore college football guy. Certainly got to sit back and have some entertainment. For much more from Jonathon on the sports side of things, you're going to want to check out the Side Bets podcast, which appears in the main In the Money media feed, wherever you get your podcasts, or you can check out. You got your own feed for that too, don't you?
Yeah. We're locked and loaded. We missed last week. Illness caught up, and Lafitte was traveling to New York, but we'll be back. We'll be back this week.
NFL playoffs coming up very soon. Definitely stuff you're going to want to check out. So interesting season of Eclipse Award voting for sure. And Jay, one of the things I love about having you on these shows, not just your depth and breadth of knowledge, being a literal Hall of Famer when it comes to horse racing journalism, but I love your approach. And for those that aren't familiar with especially how you look at the human categories, if you wouldn't mind maybe kicking us off just with a little bit of a recap of that, and then we'll just zip through these categories one by one until we get our Eclipse final answers.
Yeah, well, once I make my selections, Pete, for each horse division, I make a spreadsheet, and with not only the name of the horse, but who rode that horse, who was the trainer, who are the owners, and who bred the horse. And I look through that for commonalities in terms of the human categories, because I think just to merely look at earnings or stakes wins, while certainly very significant, doesn't tell you the whole story. And if you start seeing the same trainer popping up in several divisions with champions that you voted for, I think that helps guide where you end up going in terms of some of the selections. Same with jockey or especially breeder, which is, I think, really needs a deeper dive to get to the granular levels of some of these things. And so as we go through some of those categories later, I'll explain what I did. But for me, trainer really was, I knew going in who it would probably be, but when I did this exercise, it made it even more obvious.
And I think that makes a lot of sense because a lot of people, and we'll share some of the materials, the backup materials that voters get throughout these shows. When you look at that, what I'll call the bare form, it is going to favor a lot of times a quantity over a quality in a lot of ways. And so it's a nice and very smart thing that I have stolen that I think more voters should take a look at. Why don't we dive right into the awards, gentlemen? We'll start off looking at 2-year-old filly, one that didn't, I don't think takes too much effort to get to the bottom of, at least in terms of who the champion should be. We'll I'm throwing the PPs up there and tipping my hand, but JK, how you're not actually, we got to get you in the guild so you can be a voter again. You voted when we were back with the place with the letters, right? Did you vote one year?
No, I never voted. No, they just didn't do the paperwork. Paperwork. I just got to do it. Yeah, you're right. I need to get involved here.
I'll stay on you about that. But if you did happen to vote for 2-year-old Billy, what are your thoughts on this category?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these are straightforward, and that's the way that it should be. I mean, just FYI, absolutely is the one who will win, and I think that there's not a whole lot to that. If you can pull off a grade 1 win somewhere along the way, and you win the Breeders' Cup in these 2-year-old races, you're basically destined to be a champion. And I think that just FYI is that one.
It is interesting, how they mix in the turf horses with the dirt horses and the PPs they send around in this category. Clearly, you're supposed to be looking at those. But for me, that's more of a secondary thing if there's an unclear situation with the dirt horses. Is that similar, Jay, to how you look at it with considering dirt horses versus turf horses in this category or any of these categories, and anything to add about just FYI or any of these others?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, FYI is the deserving winner here, undefeated and winning the Breeders' Cup against all the major contenders for the title on the day. So she certainly wrapped that up in the way you're supposed to. In terms of my approach in this category, Pete, for the older horses, you've got specific carved out categories for grass horses, female grass, male grass, whereas you don't for the 2-year-olds. So that's why they're all lumped together. I tend to lean towards dirt, but if there's not an obvious standout on the dirt, then I'll certainly give strong consideration to grass horses. And in fact, my second and third in this category are both grass horses. I voted for Hard to Justify second, and She Feels Pretty third in this category. That's just so that they can get 3 finalists on the night when they announce the winners. Only the first place vote matters in terms of who wins the division. Obviously, just FYI is going to win this category.
It might mean something, though, in truth, to the people in the industry to get that invite. I can't remember if you're a finalist, if you get any freebies or if you have to still pay for the table, but still to go and be part of the festivities, I think is something that a lot of horse people would enjoy.
Pete, and Jay as well. What do you think a resume would have to look like in this division or in the boys for a primarily turf horse to win it? Because I don't think it's ever happened, really, right? I mean, I'm trying to think of one. I can't think of one. I mean, I know Newspaper of Record got, they talked about her getting it a little bit a couple years back, but what do you think a resume would have to look like? There's just not a lot of grade 1 opportunities.
Yeah, I think you'd have had to have chaos in the juvenile fillies race. For instance, if Tamara and just FYI and anybody else who'd won a grade 1 all just, crap the bed like Tamara did on the day, and some 50-1 shot with, absolutely no credentials coming in, won the race in sort of a fluke effort, then I think you start going, well, is that the horse I want to reward? Or is there somebody in the grass division who was a standout? Newspaper of Record, I'm glad you brought her up. I voted for her that year. I thought she was the best 2-year-old filly in North America that year. And I, in that specific instance, I voted for her.
Yeah, Breeders' Cup win, probably another big win somewhere along the way when it comes to the resume of that horse. But I think Jay hits the nail on the head. It'd be almost more about the chaos in the other division. Oh, that's the wrong screen. Let's see how many times I share the wrong screen as part of the shows today. Hopefully I'll get that right. Let's move on to 2-year-old male and chat about this one. Another one that I think it's pretty safe to say, was won on the racetrack at come Breeders' Cup time. Jay, what are your thoughts on the 2-year-old male category in general? And I do think it is worth mentioning seconds and thirds, even though it's only more for academic purposes.
Yeah, my top 3 in this division were the 1, 2, 3 across the finish in the Breeders' Cup. I did vote for Fierceness. Again, this is another race where you had all the top contenders for the division in the race, and he certainly won as much the best on the day. Muth and Locked were next to cross the line, and both those horses had Grade 1 victories coming into the race in the American Pharaoh and the Breeders' Futurity, respectively. So they certainly had strong credentials going in, but they were clearly inferior in the championship race to Fierceness, and so Fierceness gets it over Muth and Locked for me.
And Fierceness really looking at the PP cut there. I mean, what a serious race that came back so fast on the Beyer speed figure scale. Certainly very curious to see if he can improve on that. And the function of his being such a ginormous price, clearly very much down to that Champagne flop, because that maiden win up here, JK, certainly was one that it made him look like the kind of horse that could run a 105 maybe by the end of the 2-year-old year, or certainly early 3-year-old year, and looks to be the kind of runner that has a serious Kentucky Derby chance based on the body of work we've seen so far. Any other thoughts from you, JK, on Fierceness?
No, I mean, I think another kind of slam dunky one. I think like if you can win the Breeders' Cup and you can win another Grade 1, I think you pretty much have locked yourself into winning. And that's how it should be. I mean, that's what those 14 races are meant to be. They're supposed to be 14 championship races. Well, if you win one of them and you've got and you're like Jay said, you're not fluky. I think you deserve to be the champion.
We'll pivot over now to the 3-year-old filly category, and JK will keep it with you for your thoughts on this one.
Yeah. I don't have the thing right in front of me. Yeah, I mean, this is another one where it just feels like, if these Kentucky Oaks types, this one can get a little bit tricky. The Pretty Mischievous conversation is obviously a little bit tricky. Randomized. Chagira ended up having a pretty darn good year. Pretty Mischievous is one for me that I wouldn't have a problem with. I think that, like with the boys, if you win the Kentucky Oaks, you win the Kentucky Derby, I think you get 1.5 points when you're looking at those. We talk about that all the time, Pete, when it comes to like those kind of those Grade 1 pluses. I think those definitely count in that category as well. And look, I understand that the test is a little bit tricky for Pretty Mischievous, but I think that her resume outside of that is one that you can lean on as well. So I think my lean would always go when it comes to the Kentucky Oaks and the Derby. They get a little bit extra credit. So I'll probably go with Pretty Mischievous here.
I get it, and I think that's the way that I'm leaning. Jay, what did you do in this category? Did Pretty Mischievous do enough, or are you taking in a different direction?
I ended up going in a kind of an off-the-wall direction for a horse that is not going to win the category. But the more I looked at it, I was unsatisfied with overall with Pretty Mischievous. I mean, obviously the test is sort of that's a phony Grade 1 win, I think, for her in there, but she did win the Oaks and she did win the Acorn, which are significant races. So she had a good resume from that standpoint. I just thought this division was really weak overall. And, I'll probably take some flack for who I ended up voting for, but I went with Mage. There's not a 3-year-old filly grass division. And she only came over for 2 races, but I mean, she got beat a lip in the Breeders' Cup by Master of the Seas. And it took a Herculean effort on his part to beat her that day. She did win the QE2 Cup, and I just thought those 2 races, to me, were against better quality horses and were better performances than the best we saw out of Pretty Mischievous or Randomized. So I ended up going for her. I know she's got no shot of winning, but I just really was kind of holding my nose with Pretty Mischievous and Randomized and went in a different direction here.
I get it. I mean, both of Mage's speed figures were better than any of Pretty Mischievous's from the entire year. I don't know if that factored into it at all. I mean, for me, I think I still have a little bit too much of a bias in this category of thinking North American dirt first and thinking there was enough in the body of work for Pretty Mischievous. But let me tell you, Jay, when you say it out loud, it doesn't sound crazy. JK, what about you? What do you think of the Mage case? One thing I love is that it's not a one race campaign. That in this day and age, it's like amazing how much even just that second race means to me in taking a horse seriously for an award like this.
Well, it's funny because like we talked about this the other day, Pete, on another show we did, but like as a pick 4, pick 5, pick 6 player, my brain sees crossing the wire first. But Mage's performance getting second in the Breeders' Cup Mile was outstanding. I mean, she lost by a nasty nose, and so the fact that there should be some credit for that, I have no issue with that. But honestly, like there's no one in here that makes me feel icky, right? If someone were to vote on randomized for winning the Alabama and doing it the way that she did, I wouldn't, and then running so well, obviously running second as well in the distaff. I don't have a problem. Sometimes there's categories where it kind of makes my teeth itch if I had to pick a horse or if a horse won. None of these 3 horses really make me uncomfortable.
Any case to be made for having Ceiling Crusher in the top 3, Jay? Or do you think those are the 3? Pretty Mischievous, Mage, and randomized in some order.
If you do an all dirt ticket, then yeah, she could be 3rd behind Pretty Mischievous and randomized. So I could certainly see her getting some love in that context.
Gotcha. But yeah, I'm not, especially for the underneath awards, I lose that bias that I would that I have about American racing and dirt racing and all that. For the unders especially, I do think Mage belongs in the 3 as we talk it through, and I'm going to vote it as such. Let's move on to the 3-year-old male category, and JK will start. Actually, no, we'll go the other direction. Jay, we'll start with you. What did you end up voting for in here?
So I put Arcangelo first. I think you win the Belmont and the Travers in a year where it was really dispersed among all these horses as to who won, and it was hard for so many of these horses to put together a proper campaign. Like everybody either faded at the end of the year or got hurt or retired or worse, and it was just really a strange year for this division. And I just think a Belmont Travers double is an obvious standout for a championship in here. Behind him, I think you could have gone in any number of directions with the likes of Arabian Night and Mage and Go Rocket Ride and horses of that category. I actually went with Forte and Practical Move for the runner-up spots, but Arcangelo to me is the clear-cut deserving champion of this division.
I get it, and I agree. Those races are both in that grade 1 plus category. We were talking about the clock. Love these races. Generally speaking, Jay, how much, if at all, do you consider the clock and the figures when you're looking at this type of voting?
I'm more of a head-to-head guy than when I'm handicapping. I look at the figures. Obviously, when it's something like this exercise, it's more of a resume and what was your body of work? Who did you beat? What races did you win? And not quite as much the figs, though. If it's a coin flip kind of situation, then I might look at that and say, okay, who was the faster horse at the best, on their best day? I might look at something like that, but that's far down the numbers of things that I evaluate compared to other things.
Makes sense. I'm Team Arcangelo. I definitely get the Practical Move case. I get the Go Rocket Ride case and what might have been. But of course, then you got to tie in the form of the Arabian Night and decide what you want to do there. Bit of a grab bag underneath the top one, but I'm pretty comfortable with Arcangelo. Would that be where your vote would go, Jonathan?
Yeah, we've talked about this before, and it's actually kind of a fun bar trick I like to do with people is to ask them to rank the 5 most important 3-year-old races in their order. And you usually get a pretty similar order when it comes to a lot of different people. I'd be curious to hear your guys's, but like for me, obviously the Derby's number 1, then it's the Travers, then it's the Belmont, then for me it's the Preakness, and then the Haskell. Like those are the 5 most important, and that's the order in which I weigh them in my brain. If any horse wins wins 2 of those 5 races, to me, it's like an automatic they win. Now, if they win like the Haskell and the Preakness, those are on the lower end of the scale, and a big Derby winner and a couple of other big performances could kind of elevate it. But you win the Belmont, you win the Travers, you win a combination of 2 of those 5 races or even more, then to me, you deserve to be champion. So I got no problem with Arcangelo. And he probably would have, look, He likely would have been second choice in the Classic if he would have run. Not that that matters, but that's how good he was. That's how impactful he was. Right.
He was the international favorite until all that negative steam with all the workout issues and such. I mean, I think that's very reasonable to say. I agree with your order of those races for sure. In my view, but of course, then you got to weigh in what they're going to do, what they've done against elders. Now, this was a sort of a weird Pacific Classic year where the top of the market was all 3-year-olds, but like generally speaking, I'd want to give a little extra credit there. And then obviously what they do in the Classic matters immensely. How about you, Jay, just on that idea of the ranking of the top 3-year-old races? Are we on to something or are we out to lunch?
I think Jonathon had him ranked. I'd also say that the Pennsylvania Derby has become a pretty significant race too, and maybe that's number 6 in the rankings, but it's up there. I mean, to me, it's a top race now that belongs in that conversation. Maybe arguing over what's 4, 5, and 6. I think it would be in that context, certainly not 1, 2, 3. And Pete, the point you made was something I was going to bring up. I think races against older horses in the fall count for a lot. This year, like you said, the Pacific Classic was the older horses in that race weren't all that strong. The 3-year-olds dominated, but that counts for something. A 3-year-old beating older horses in a race like that, or the Jockey Club Gold Cup, or the Woodward, and certainly if they were to do well in something like the Breeders' Cup Classic, those are things that come into play. Many years it didn't this year in terms of the Breeders' Cup Classic, but I think there's always opportunities in other years where you'll see something like that, and you have to weigh it strongly if a 3-year-old who's had a good year runs well in the Classic.
We'll move on to female sprinter, one where I imagine there'll be some debate about how things played out on the racetrack. Which direction do you lean here, JK, and what I think is basically a 2-horse race, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to punish Echo Zulu for being injured and not being able to participate. I think she would have given Goodnight Olive all she wanted in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint, but she didn't. And Goodnight Olive won and was back-to-back. And I understand that Echo Zulu beat her head-to-head, so I wouldn't have a problem with someone wanting to go that direction. But when it's close, I'm always going to defer to one of the 14 purple races. And if Goodnight Olive wins, then that race, then I'll go there with it. Echo Zulu was outstanding. Like I said, I wouldn't be upset at anyone who picked her, but I'm going to defer to the Breeders' Cup champion and Goodnight Olive.
I'm okay with it. I mean, from a speed figure point of view, it's probably one of the other, you got head-to-head in figures in the Echo Zulu corner, but boy, did I love how Goodnight Olive ran in the ballerina. I felt like she was taken out of her comfort zone and still ran such a big race and stuck on so well. And then to turn up at the Breeders' Cup and get that done. I'm okay with the Goodnight Olive over Echo Zulu in this category. How do you see it, Jay?
Yeah, I struggled with this one more than any other category because I could make a strong case for both of these fillies, and I really had or in the case of Goodnight Olive, a mare, I really had a tough time with this, and I ended up giving the slightest of preferences to Echo Zulu because of the one head-to-head meeting, and it's not certain that Echo Zulu was going to run against Goodnight Olive in the filly and mare sprint. They were giving strong consideration to going against the boys in the sprint. It's all moot because unfortunately she suffered a career-ending injury training for the Breeders' Cup, but she had a perfect record. Goodnight Olive had a terrific year as well. And as Jonathon mentioned, she won the championship race, and you can't discount Goodnight Olive for winning a race that Echo Zulu wasn't in because Echo Zulu got hurt. You don't want to punish Goodnight Olive for that. That's certainly not fair. But by the same token, Goodnight Olive Echo Zulu didn't get a chance to run in that race because of or in the Breeders' Cup, I should say, because of a career-ending injury. So I ended up, the thing that swayed me most was just the one head-to-head meeting where Echo Zulu, beat her. And so that was the way I ended up going. I put Echo Zulu over Goodnight Olive. We can't write tie in for our votes. You have to pick 1 and 2. This is a case where if we were allowed to split the vote, I would have voted for a tie with these two.
I tend to agree. And just my maybe Breeders' Cup fandom pushing me in one direction over another. Reasonable minds can certainly disagree about that one. Let's move on to the male sprinter category here. And Jay, we'll let you lead off with how you approach this category.
Yeah, this fortunately was a lot easier. Elite Power just had a sensational year. He won the Breeders' Cup Sprint for the second straight year, and significantly, he and Goodnight had just a great rivalry, not only here but overseas as well. And Elite Power beat him 3 out of the 4 times, including in the Breeders' Cup. They were both just high quality sprinters, but Elite Power gets this, and I would imagine he'll be pretty strongly favored in this category. And I did put Goodnight second because he's certainly the most deserving runner-up behind him.
No doubt about it. And in terms of third, just for academic purposes, Cody's Wish make an appearance on your ballot, or did you go in a different direction?
Not in this category. He makes appearances in other categories. I actually voted for the Chosen Vron for third. I just thought he had a terrific year, and I thought that Bing Crosby was a field where he beat a number of horses who had strong credentials, like Dr. Schivel, for instance, who ran back in the Breeders' Cup. That was, to me, like the key race to give him the third spot. But it was a long way back to third from the top 2, certainly.
Any use to give praise to the Chosen Vron and his amazing career. 5-year-old gelding, 14 for 19 lifetime, obviously dominant against Calbreds, but can knock heads against the big boys too, even if not quite in that Elite Power Goodnight category. Anything to add here, JK, or is this one we can quickly move on from?
Yeah, no, Elite Power for me. And I think that, look, I we'll talk about it a little bit as we go. I think that you want to try to be careful, like not to make these like lifetime achievement awards. You want it to kind of stay within the fact that the calendar year of which you're discussing. But I do think that even in Goodnight Olive's case, as well as Elite Power, the fact that they were champions who came back and were successful again to stretch out that success over an entire calendar year, I do think that deserves a little bit of extra bonus credit in your mind. Not that Elite Power needed it to win this category for the second straight year, but it just a point that I wanted to make, that I do think that there should be some extra consideration considering the longevity of these horses being as good as they are.
You say that about a Lifetime Achievement Award, but of course there are famous examples where for many voters, that's exactly what they become, but point well taken in any event. Let's move on to the female turf category as I share those PP cuts up on the screen here. Jonathan, what did you do in this category?
Yeah, let me just pull it up so I don't say something stupid here.
I can make you go second on all of these since Jay already voted. That might make.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, look, I'm a huge Italian fan, but she's kind of tailed off towards the end of the year. Warlike Goddess, she had some pretty big moments, some really big races. I'm a little bit biased because I like one of these horses significantly more than I like the other one. So I'm probably, good thing I'm not voting on this because I would probably go in Italian. I'd probably go in Italian, but like I said, I wouldn't get sick if someone did Warlike Goddess.
Mage, another one who could come up certainly in this category. Inspiral, if you're not afraid of the one number horses domestically, that's obviously another reasonable way to go here. How did you end up approaching this one, Jay?
I'm glad you mentioned that last name there, Pete, because that's the way I went. For me, I don't like to usually vote for one start in North America horses. But in this specific case, I did go for Inspiral for several reasons. First off, for me, while I don't count the number of grade 1 wins overseas as something on their resume when factoring in who I would vote for here, I do like to see if a European horse comes over and wins here in one start, that they had a proper high-class resume coming here and they're not like a fluky horse. And obviously Inspiral is not a fluky horse. She is a top-class, world-class kind of filly. Jonathan alluded to this. I just thought In Italian didn't finish the year off well at all, including a couple losses to horses that I think are just inferior stablemates of hers. And then again, similar to the Echo Zulu Goodnight Olive situation earlier, I just came back to head here. And in the one time they ran against one another, Inspiral beat In Italian. So that was the way I went. Inspiral first and In Italian second in this category.
It is interesting that in these PP cuts that they send us, they include the foreign races, which, if my understanding of the rules is correct, Jay, is not supposed to factor in to what we do here. If it did, it would certainly turn these turf categories on their head. I think you already did a good job explaining that you sort of look at them as a secondary thing. But I do think that's an interesting interpretation they ask the voters. They're giving you information that they say they don't really want you to be voting on, or am I not even understanding that right?
No, I mean, they're just giving you a PP cut of the horse's campaign for the calendar year. And that was Inspiral's campaign for the calendar year. But, in order to be eligible for an Eclipse Award, you have to run at least one time in North America. And she did. And she ran in one of the purple races, one of the 14 purple races, and won it. And it was a top field. I mean, that was a really, really good field. And her performance was terrific. And so, like you said, you're not supposed to use the foreign races as sort of, well, she won 3 grade 1s or group 1s. But like I was saying earlier, to make a case for a horse like that, I like them to at least be horses who have had top campaigns overseas, come here with credentials, and then finish the year off with a championship performance on these shores to get a vote from me over a North American based horse. And I would have preferred, I think, in theory, to vote for an Italian, but I couldn't in good conscience the way her year finished off.
Yeah, I hear you about the losses to the less fancied stablemates. And as someone who's obviously a big Mage fan, I'm tempted to go Mage over Inspiral for the extra race and for the fact that, the Breeders' Cup Mile is, and that was a salty race and the superior to me of the filly and mare turf in many ways.
Right. I put her third. And the reason I voted for her in the other category on top and not in this one is because the other category was, 3-year-old only. And this is a different category. This is female turf. I can see somebody obviously making a case for her. I mean, I certainly did for 3-year-old filly, but that was why I put her only third here behind the other 2 older horses.
Let's zip over to the male companion category for Eclipse Male Turf. And another one where I feel like there's some interesting conversations that could potentially be had. Who did you end up using on your ticket, Jay?
Up to the Mark just had a sensational year. And the thing that I really liked about his campaign was the versatility that he showed to win at a mile, beating Master of the Seas, to run a bang-up second in the turf against Augusta Rodin. I mean, that was a terrific year. And his win in the Manhattan was dynamic. So he, to me, is a deserving winner here, because here's a situation where Augusta Rodin came over and beat him in their one head-to-head meeting. So you might say, all right, I'm being inconsistent in the way I interpret this as opposed to the Italian Inspiral question. But I don't think so. When you look at Up to the Mark's overall record, to me, he had a sensational year, and he finished off the year well. He was second in that race, but my God, everything else he did was just dynamic. And to me, his body of work wins out in this category. So I put him first. I put Augusta Rodin second, and Master of the Seas third in this category.
That was the other horse I was going to bring up. I don't see that as inconsistent because of the body of work that Up to the Mark had. And I think you really have to be holding injury against him to almost to not put him there. I mean, look, if you have no problem with one number horses, obviously then Augusta Rodin makes sense. But boy, for me, that loss in the Breeders' Cup Turf was one of those losses where Up to the Mark just gained so much in stature to me. He's the one I want, but I am a little bit torn with wanting to reward what Master of the Seas did over here with the giant Woodbine Mile, the terrific run to Up to the Mark in the turf mile. Maybe that nose decision becomes the tiebreaker here, then coming back and winning his Breeders' Cup race. Was that a tricky decision for you at all? Or like you said before, Jay, with the decision on the track, head-to-head being something that you look at, was it maybe not that hard, even though that was only a nose margin?
Yeah, it was both things made it clear that Up to the Mark was superior to the Master of the Seas for me. The head-to-head, first off, and then the overall body of work. Like I said, I prefer to lean to North American horses if they have a strong overall campaign all year, and he did. He was good all year, and he finished off the year well. Even though he didn't win that last race, he obviously ran what in many years would have been a winning race. So to me, his overall year's work was terrific and deserving of the title in this division.
Jonathan, where would your theoretical vote go in this category?
Yeah, up to the mark. It's funny too. I was thinking about it. I mean, I don't want to play the what if game, but just for the sake of this conversation, because I think he's a slam dunk to win it. I do think that like if he were to not have had the summer injury, where he would have pulled off one more grade one this summer, maybe the 4-star Dave or something like that, and then he would have actually won the Breeders' Cup. I think he would have won Horse of the Year. And maybe even just winning the Breeders' Cup on its own right would have been enough for him to give White Abarrio and Cody's Wish a real run for their money. I thought he had an outstanding year. I mean, we have 3 or 4 really important turf races, and he won 3 of them. You know, with the Derby Day, Belmont Day, the handful of grade 1 miles that happened in California or Keeneland or in New York. I thought he was outstanding this year, and he ran extremely well, like you said, in the Breeders' Cup. So that'll be an easy one for me.
Yeah, I mean, you make a strong case. Maybe I had that in my mind a little bit more competitive than it is when we really sit there and dive into all the form on that one. We will move ahead. Where do we go next? We will go to the older dirt female category next. And I'm going to send it back, make life easy on JK, who didn't have to actually cast votes, so maybe doesn't have this form in his head quite as much as Jay does. What did you end up doing here?
Oh, am I going first?
No. Did Jay freeze, or did we lose his voice?
I thought you were asking. I misunderstood. I guess it was 2 out of 3. I understood what you were saying.
It was bad hosting. I was lost trying to find the tab. So I'll take that one as a host fail. Jay,
No, that was me.
More in your
that
head.
was I need my second cup of coffee out here. Fail. That's what that was. No, Idiomatic is certainly the deserving and obvious horse in this division. She had a terrific overall year. She won the race that mattered most at the end, beating all the contenders for the title in that race in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. So she's clearly the one who deserves this category. Behind her, though, it's really kind of then it became challenging to fill out the ballot for second and third. I put Clairiere second and Adair Manor third, but you could have made cases for the likes of even Nest or Played Hard or somebody like that. But the vote that matters most is first place, and this is an easy one.
Yeah, I get that for sure. That was a terrific campaign. Just the string of ones at the end of the PPs and grade 1 races make it easy. I feel like there's you could for underneath honors you could throw in a Goodnight Olive if you wanted to here. Clairiere with the 2 grade 1s though in the spring probably would end up being my second pick in this one. Jonathan, how about you? I assume you agree with the dunk idea for Idiomatic. Who do you like underneath?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that this is what I think if you close your eyes at night and you think of what an Eclipse championship resume looks like, it's what it looks like. 8 for 9, like running all year long, 3 grade 1 wins, and then winning the championship race. This one's a slam dunk for me. And I actually think this might be the biggest spread category. I mean, I think some people will try to get cute with Gunite a little bit, maybe against Elite Power. Maybe Just FYI will be a pretty big slam dunk, or Fierceness, but I think Idiomatic's gonna have a pretty big spread as well, people voting on her.
Let's move to the older dirt male category. Jay, we'll bring it right back. We'll bring it right back to you for a summing up of this category.
Yeah, I mean, this was I think it's a 2-horse race for this category between Cody's Wish and White Abarrio. They both won Breeders' Cup races. They ran against each other twice during the year, and they split those 2 divisions, those 2 meetings, I should say. I just thought Cody's Wish had the slightly better overall record of the 2, and the race that I come back to most was the Met Mile. I just thought that was, maybe the best dirt performance of the year by any horse in North America, and so for me, he wins out for those reasons. So Cody's Wish over White Abarrio, and then for third in this category, I mean, you could have gone in a number of different directions. And I just thought most of the two-turn horses in this division, just didn't put together campaigns that you were crazy about. Like Art Collector was out early and then unfortunately passed away. Bright Future won a grade 1, but what else did he, what did he do? Stiletto Boy's a hard horse to warm up to overall, as was was Proxy. So I actually put Elite Power third in this division just to have a third place vote. It doesn't really matter per se, because again, only the first place votes matter in terms of who wins, but I didn't like any of the other two-turn horses enough to put them third, more so than Elite Power. So that's who I threw in as third place.
And it sounds like a similar deal to what we were talking about with Turf versus Dirt with the juveniles. These older awards, you're going to want to go with a two-turn horse unless some special circumstances bring a sprinter to the fore. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Jonathon, how about you? You buying that case that it's really a 2-horse race, and with the grade 1 plus of the Met Mile going the way it did? Are you with Cody here?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the Met Mile and the Whitney cancel each other out, right? I think they're both those grade 1 pluses. They're in that handful of most important races in North America. They cancel each other out. The Breeders' Cup Classic obviously carries a little bit more weight, in my opinion, to the Dirt Mile, but it's that next grade 1 that Cody's Wish got. It's the body of work for Cody's Wish. I try not to go body of work, but when it comes really close and you're looking for something to kind of tie it, Cody's Wish. And then look, I know this has no place in what we're talking about but I also think that the emotional baggage that came with Cody's Wish is another thing that could potentially impact some voters, and possibly the negative baggage the other way with White Abarrio, where there's going to be some people that are going to have a hard time voting for Rick Dutrow, whether you think that's fair or not. There's going to be a couple people that are going to struggle with that. So I'm not trying to morning line this thing or predict what other people are going to do, but I do believe that Cody's Wish will win, and I'm fine with that.
I think it's good. I mean, I guess it's worth pausing on the Dutrow thing. I mean, I think that would be unfair to hold paid for transgressions by a trainer who obviously came back in raring form against a horse like that. But this voting body, Jay, have you seen that type of thing before? Do you think that might hurt Abarrio's chances, or maybe just relative to the feel-good story of Cody's Wish?
Well, I mean, we'll take both those things separately. So I've seen this before in terms of people saying, well, I'm not going to vote for a certain individual because their horse is tested positive, or I don't really like them. But, we didn't bring this up with Forte. And if you're not going to bring it up with Forte and the way his hopeful played out and what happened at the Kentucky Derby and things like that, then to me, it's grossly unfair to say I'm going to not vote for White Abarrio because I don't like Rick Dutrow. I mean, if you're going to take that position with Dutrow, which I would not, and I think would be wrong to take, then you better also take it with Forte and Rapoli and Pletcher and everything connected to that. That's the way I look at that specific situation. So that's where I come down there.
Very fair-minded, and to clarify for anybody watching a clip of this or watching the show, in your case, you shouldn't hold either thing against either one.
In my opinion, you should not. No, I mean, but there are people who several years ago weren't voting for horses trained by a certain individual who has white hair and is based in California because they didn't like the way he behaved or things like that. And it's like, if you take that position, just be consistent throughout. I didn't take that position then, and I'm not going to take it with Dutrow or Forte and Pletcher, Rapoli, et cetera. But if you did take that position then you better just be consistent in the way you approach this. That's what I'm saying. I don't think you should pick and choose who you like and who you don't like. That I really find distasteful.
Let's move on to the steeplechase category, which is a really interesting one this year. I was grateful also, in the past we've had a lot of conversation about this, and I've been a jump fan for a long time. Sean Clancy, who has a horse in this race here, one of the people who really helped get me involved in the game. And, it's something that I follow and have never not voted for in the years I've had the privilege to cast these votes. Some people feel differently, This year, one thing I thought was cool was that Kerry Bryan, the trainer of both flat and steeplechase runners, wrote a little analysis, I think, to sort of help people along and give a little bit more details, which I thought was really productive. Because look, I get being frustrated if you're a big jump fan and you see people who don't vote and you take that as an insult or whatever. But how much better is it to do something about it and try to educate people than just to, hurl brickbats from the sideline. So credit to her for doing that. As for this category itself, boy, it's tricky. I mean, I see it as a 3-horse. It's a 3-horse affair. I think a lot of people are gonna go for Noah and the Ark for winning the biggest race, but boy, you want to talk about not having a body of work beyond that. And I mean, the horse was 17-1 that day and yielding at Far Hills. And Merrymaker ran such a good second and had that backed up with the Lonesome Glory. And then get ready, everybody out there, to accuse me of being a homer, because I'm going to be one in this category. Then you've got Awakened, owned by Sean Clancy's Riverty Table and our friends Marshall Graham and Clay Sanders and the partners at 10 Strike Racing, who has beaten Merrymaker twice. And they were handicaps, but I think he gave him 2 pounds in one and nothing in the other. It's not easy. But as much as I value the Shepherd as probably the second biggest run of the year, I'm comfortable going Awakened here. It's really a bit of a coin flip between him and Merrymaker. And I also wouldn't fight with anybody who wanted to say, you know what, Noah and the Ark won it on the track in the Grand National. Jay, is this a category you voted in this year?
No, I was consistent as always and did not vote in the steeplechase category. I did look at it. I wanted to maybe see if I could find something that stood out to me. There was a knock on every single horse in here, and I just decided to defer and leave it to people who have, who saw these horses. I never saw any of them in person, and I just didn't feel comfortable voting for anybody here. I actually thought David Aragona made a really good logical case on Twitter/X for Snap Decision, who didn't win a quote unquote grade 1, but had significant wins and, was in the races where he got beat in grade 1s, was giving away just absolute gobs of weight to the horses who beat him. And I think he made a compelling case for the horse, but, he was 0 for 2 against Merrymaker in their 2 head-to-head meetings. So to me, I went round and round here, and finally it was like, you know what? I usually don't vote in this category, and I'm going to take a pass again this year.
I think that's fair enough. I mean, and one thing I'll say for the steeplechase game, I don't know why, these big spreads and weight spreads in graded races. I don't know. There's got to be. I don't know enough about it, but my strong suspicion is there's probably a better way to do it, because especially if one of their goals is to get more people paying attention and using the Eclipse Awards as a tool to help market the sport, that addition of a major handicapping factor that the voting body doesn't look at hardly in any other race all year to become a major thing in this, it's a little tricky. I wonder if there isn't a better way with those big summer races to have them run at something closer to level weights. Maybe I'm sure there's nuances that I'm missing. I'm a fan, but I'm not down the rabbit hole like I am with flat racing for sure. JK, did you have any thoughts on the steeplechase category?
No, I'm just going to hop on the soapbox real quick and do what I like to do sometimes and point out people's stupidity. Like, I don't understand why people want to get so upset and want to and have a problem with someone who doesn't feel like they have the knowledge in which to make the best decision, decides to not vote. Would you rather someone just place a vote based off of looking at the past performances and trying to I don't understand why people are bothered by that. I appreciate that if you don't know, you don't know. So why should you feel the obligation to do some research to then try to, you haven't paid attention all year. So for 8 minutes does it matter if someone does or not? I find that to be silly. If and when I vote, I will do the same thing that Jay does, which is pass, because I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
I thought what Jay said was interesting, though. It sounded to me, Jay, like if it was a clearer answer, you're willing to do some work here. It's just
I did the work. I tried, and to me, they all looked the same. They all had knocks on them, and I was like, I can't say that I can vote for Noah the Ark over Merrymaker, or Awakened over Noah the Ark, or Snap Decision over all of them, or Belfast Bandit. I mean, they all kind of took turns beating one another, or had knocks on one another for head-to-heads, or in the case, like you pointed out, of Noah and the Ark, of having absolutely no form and then winning in a bog with Lasix. You were talking about the the weight spreads in these grade ones? How about, they're in the flat racing, which is run under, the graded stakes committee and TOBA rules, no Lasix is allowed in those races. But here, you've got some races with Lasix, some without. It's really an inconsistent presentation of a category. And I think all grade ones, whether flat or jump, should be weight for age. And I'd like to see some consistency on medication across both disciplines as well.
I think that's very reasonable, constructive criticism. I'm going to start jumping around a little bit, so we'll end with horse, even though that's next in my situation here. As I look at the ballot, we'll go to the Jockeys Award real quick. Jay, how did you rank your top 3 riders?
So, again, as we said at the beginning of this exercise, I like to make my little grid and see if there's commonality among riders or trainers or owners or breeders when voting in these categories. And for the horses that I voted for divisional championships, Irad was on 2 of them: Elite Power, the male sprinter, and Up to the Mark, the male grass horse. So that certainly was something in his favor. But look, he had the best year overall anyway, in terms of wins, in terms of purse earnings, in terms of grade 1 stakes wins. So it's Irad again, as far as I'm concerned. My second and third behind him were challenging because I had 3 guys for 2 spots. And the odd man out for me, unfortunately, ended up being Javier Castellano, who had a terrific year with, Derby and Belmont wins. But, I voted for Junior Alvarado for second in this division, again, because of the commonality factor. He rode Cody's Wish. He rode Just FYI. I think Cody's Wish is the horse of the year favorite. And I think, you get extra credit for being in those types of events. And then I put Flavien Prat third. He had the second most grade 1 wins behind Ortiz. So, Irad for first, and I think he will win, and I think he deserves it. Then Junior Alvarado and Flavien Prat for me in this division.
What do you think, JK? I mean, I think you're going to agree with Irad for sure, but if you were talking about how to fill out the second and third spots, I'm thinking you might have some different ideas just because it's so competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with Irad. I have 2 thoughts. One is that, Irad he's going to always be at the top, at least for I would think for the next maybe 5 to 10 years. Just the way that he rides, where he rides, who he rides for. He rides first call basically for the 2 best trainers on the East Coast. You know what I mean? And so he's always going to kind of be in this position. And I don't want to punish him for that. I don't want to get to one of those positions where we start just kind of being bored by him winning all the time and then start trying to think of creative ways to give it to someone else. I don't think that's really fair. I think he's earned it. At the same time, I would like people to keep an open mind like Jay has with ideas like Junior Alvarado and ideas like Javier. And I don't want it to become a lazy situation where people just look at, 39 million, 1,500 wins. Oh, it's Irad again. It can be, and what the heck, let's do it 5, 6, 7 years in a row, whatever it takes. But I do think that there is opportunities for some cool things that happen for other riders that should be considered when deciding who the champion rider is. Yes, Irad, I'm fine with. Fine with Flavien. I would probably have Javier just because I don't remember the exact number, but it felt like he was on a run for like 6 grade 1s. For where his career was and where he is now, I think that deserves some recognition. I don't think he deserves to win into the teeth of what Irad did, but I do think he deserves some recognition.
Let's go to the trainer category next. We'll pop that up on the screen. And this is an interesting one where I know you've got a strong feeling, Jason. We'll throw the ball right back in your court.
Yeah. And Jonathon sort of alludes to this a moment ago when he talked about, look, you got to look beyond just who's at the top of the table in terms of purse earnings. And, Brad Cox had another fantastic year in terms of purse earnings and grade 1 wins and things of that nature. But, to me, Bill Mott should be, I don't know that he will be, but he should be an absolute winner by acclamation here. He's going to have the champion 2-year-old filly in Just FYI. He's going to have the champion older dirt horse and perhaps horse of the year in Cody's Wish. And he's going to have the champion sprinter for the 2nd straight year in Elite Power. There's no other trainer who, by my way of looking at it, is going to end up with 3 divisional Eclipse Awards, as well as a Horse of the Year likely winner as well. And to me, that is what we're voting on here. We're voting on, what you had and what you did with it in order to try and win championships. And Mott, to me, absolutely stands out.
It's easy for this, like JK was saying, with jockeys to just become a numbers game. But I think that's a very, very strong case you make. Who else did you put on the ballot behind him? I'm curious if you just defaulted to sort of the top of the table here, Jay, or if you kept the creativity going.
No, I actually, there were 3 other guys for 2 spots. And funny enough, Cox ended up being the odd man out for me. I voted for Pletcher second. Again, with the commonality situation. Yep. He's going to have the 2-year-old male champion in Fierceness, and he's going to have the male turf champion in Up to the Mark. And he also had a good overall year as well. And then I put Chad Brown third, who's, he's going to have potential Eclipse Award winners for Goodnight Olive and in Italian. He also had, terrific final, I think both hard to justify and especially randomized are going to be finalists in their divisions. He was the co-winner of the title at Saratoga. He had a great year. So Mott, Pletcher, Brown in that order for me.
JK, where are you here?
Yeah, look, I'm good with, I haven't been forced to have to make the decisions that you guys have with actually placing the vote, but I'm fine with Bill Mott winning. The other thing too is like, it's kind of one of those situations, the same as Irad. I don't want to punish Irad. I don't want to punish Brad, Chad, Todd, and Steve, but they're always going to be where they're at because of the size of their stables, the races that they're in, their owners, their horse population. They're going to always kind of be at the top. And I think that you want to make sure that whoever gets it actually had an exceptional year, something that kind of stands out. And with those 4 guys, they kind of all look the same to a certain extent. Maybe one had more grade 1s, this one had more graded 6, this one had more money, this one had this one. I think what Bill Mott did is unique, and it should be considered. Now, look, if Brad were to run away with it a little bit more, I'd have no problem just giving it to Brad in that situation. If he ran away from a money standpoint, a grade 1 win standpoint. But when they're all kind of muddied together, let's look at it objectively and what greatness was. And it feels like Bill Mott did that this year.
We have gone on. We've taken more time than I thought having this, and it hasn't felt like it. I just happened to look at the clock. We have a few more categories to get to, and we're gonna and we'll do it. But let me go to one that I think we can maybe do. It could either be a really long conversation or a really quick conversation, and I'm talking about in this case, apprentice jockey. Jay, who did you end up voting for?
I did what I do every year. I abstain from this category. I hate this category. I think it's unnecessary. There's no apprentice trainer category. Right. You're voting largely for people who do not ride on the major circuits. Axel Concepcion, who is going to win this category because he has more wins and more purse earnings than anybody else. How many graded stakes wins did he have last in 2023? Do you guys know? I'll tell you, 0. So, how do you measure that against, the other riders that he's up against, other than just looking at numbers on a piece of paper and maybe the few times you watched him ride on a Thursday night on TV from Turfway? I hate this category and I abstain from it always.
It's, what I think is so tough about this category is because we just bring our prejudices. Like, if you are going to vote, like, I kind of want to vote for Sophia Vivas because I was really, really impressed because, Woodbine are a client and I watch them all the time in a way that I don't some of these other apprentices. And that's not fair. I fully recognize that's not fair. That's not really how it's supposed to work. So I'm going to probably vote, but I'm not going to feel great about it. And I very much respect your point, Jay. What about you, Jonathan, for this apprentice category?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Jay on it. It's I guess if we're looking at it from a positive standpoint, I guess that it is a great opportunity for a young rider to get some recognition that can hopefully propel them on to doing more next year by being able to say, I got the Eclipse Award winning rider. Are you open in the 7th? Like, that's all great for the rider. But yeah, it's this category to me is the laziest of the categories where everyone just defaults to wins and money. And it's like, I could do without it as well.
let's move on to owners at this point, where this is the data they send us along to look at. Again, it'd be very easy to default to where these numbers are, but I think that Jay's trick / technique of looking at the champions and going through might yield a little bit more insight here. How did it end up for you?
Usually I just try and not vote for Godolphin because they usually just win with sheer numbers and overwhelm you in terms of the numbers of horse they have. But they deserve it, I think, this year for owner. Cody's Wish, again, is going to be the champion older dirt horse, in my opinion. I voted for Mage for the 3-year-old filly title. But if you don't vote for Mage and you decide in that category you're voting for Pretty Mischievous, hey, you're voting for Godolphin there as well. Yeah. So and they also had Master of the Seas, who had a terrific year and won a Breeders' Cup race. So they won 2 Breeders' Cup races with Master of the Seas and Cody's Wish. They ran 1-2 in the mile with Master of the Seas and Mage. I mean, they had a great year. And to me, they deserve it. So I voted for them first. I put Mike Rapoli second. He is the sole owner of Fierceness and the co-owner of Up to the Mark. And so to me, that was a terrific body of work. He also has obviously Forte, who had a very good year as well. So I voted for him second. And I voted for Judmont for third place in this category. They also had, in my way of looking at it, 2 horses that are going to be champions in Idiomatic and Elite Power. So they were deserving. So I felt really comfortable with how I ended up voting in this category in the top 3, all of whom are connected to multiple champions.
Godolphin, Rapoli, Judmont, trifecta. Anything to add, Jonathan, before we move on to Breeder?
No, Godolphin. That was an easy one.
And this one might be easy as well. How did you break down the Breeder category in terms of this year's Eclipse Awards?
Yeah, I mean, again, I came back to Godolphin, who they're at the top of the table in terms of earnings, and I don't like to just sort of by rote do something like that. But every horse that I just mentioned when we were talking about who they had for the owner category, all of them are homebreds. So they bred every one of those horses that I just mentioned, many of whom are going to be champions or likely champions. Mage, Pretty Mischievous, Cody's Wish, Master of the Seas. Every one of those horses is a homebred. They had a fantastic year on that side of the ledger as well. And so I voted for them. I put Spendthrift second. They're the breeders of White Abarrio. And to me, White Abarrio on my ballot is going to be finishing second. And I'm sort of tipping what we're doing horse of the year wise here, but that's why I ended up voting for Spendthrift second for breeder. And I put Alpha Delta third. They're the breeders of Elite Power. So that was how I voted in the breeder category. But I think, even though Godolphin kind of overwhelms you with numbers, they certainly overwhelmed with quality this year too, and they deserve it.
Stone Street, I think, deserve a mention while we're talking about this, with the 5 grade 1s and the 14 graded wins, but not enough to put them over Godolphin and that huge year. Jonathan, anything to add here, or was this just another slam dunk for Godolphin for you?
The boys in blue.
JK going for the boys in blue. All right, we're up to the last category here. And we'll pull this up. This is interesting. You know what? There's probably something prettier I can share than this tab that I just put up here. I'm not sure what this. I'm not even sure what this tab I just pulled up is. I'm going to work on that while we begin the discussion here. Jay, you have tipped your hand, so this one I'm going to throw this back to Jonathan to get his ideas on it. Do you see this similarly to the way Jay has laid it out, and where would your vote go?
Yeah, it's horse of the year, right? I can't with White Abarrio's, very small resume. I mean, look, I love the Whitney. It's that and the Met Mile are my 2 favorite races of the year, the ones I look the most forward to. And he won the Whitney and he did it impressively. And then he came back and he won the Classic, and that's outstanding and good for him. And he's got a lot of money in his bank account, but I need a little bit more for like horse of the year. When you look at that list of people that are horses that have won this, all of their resumes are better than what we're seeing from White Abarrio. And so I have no problem deferring to Cody's wish with that extra grade 1, with the Met Mile as well, and with another Breeders' Cup win.
Sounds pretty logical to me. Jay, it sounds like this is one, I don't know if I'd say you went back and forth, but you clearly considered a lot. What was your logic behind your ultimate decision?
Well, Cody's Wish and White Abarrio were my 1-2 for older male dirt. So obviously, if I'm ranking them for Horse of the Year, from a consistency standpoint and a logical standpoint, they have to be in that order, right? So then the question becomes, is there anybody I want to put above those two? And to me, I know there's a lot of sentiment out there, it seems, for Idiomatic. I didn't really consider her. To me, she had a great year. She had a long campaign, but every race she ran in is a restricted race. And I don't like to reward horses who only run in restricted races if there are other options. So to me, she wasn't really an option. Up to the Mark, though, was a serious option. And I gave him a real long look, but I still ended up deciding to go with Cody's Wish. But if somebody came to me and said, I think Up to the Mark deserves to be Horse of the Year, I wouldn't argue with them. I thought he had a great year. But for me, Cody's Wish wins out. And we were talking about this earlier about the sentiment aspect of this. And I do think he'll get some votes in that regard because of the story behind Cody Dorman and all that. You can call me a cold-hearted hard-ass, but that doesn't enter into it for me. To me, it needs to be just, let's look at the facts and what a horse accomplished. And you don't need to, the Cody Dorman story is wonderful, and it certainly adds to what happened with Cody's Wish. But from a voting standpoint, I think Cody's Wish can stand on his own merits in terms of what he accomplished on the racetrack. And I ended up voting for him for Horse of the Year. But White Abarrio and Up to the Mark filled out the top 3 for me.
I agree with everything you guys said. To get back to the point JK brought up earlier about what would Up to the Mark needed to have done, for me, I think he might have needed not just to win the turf, but maybe have that other win in the summer. And then for me, maybe I would have felt like that was just too overwhelming to say no to. But again, with my bias towards dirt, I did happily go Cody's Wish. And I agree, it's not because of the sentiment, but the sentiment is probably the reason why this is I'm going to guess isn't even going to really be close at the end of the day, but it's a good discussion to have where certainly reasonable minds can disagree. If you're watching along on YouTube, let us know who you'd vote for Horse of the Year. Let us know where we got it wrong in any of these categories. Going to try to be more interactive on the YouTube channel this year. So feel free in the comments. So feel free to hop in there and let us know what you think. If you're listening on pod, you can hop over to our YouTube channel, In the Money Media, and do that. If you're watching on YouTube and are interested in much more from us, make sure you subscribe to In the Money Media wherever you get your podcast. Any closing thoughts, gentlemen, about this year's Eclipse Awards? I did get the small bummer news. It's not a bummer. It's just life priorities. I am going to not make the awards, even though they're in a theoretically convenient time, because I have a Taekwondo belt test to go to in Brooklyn that night. And it's not me being tested, because God knows you wouldn't see me breaking boards or bricks or any of that exciting stuff, but I can't miss it. So I'll come down.
Is that for Perrin?
That's for Perrin, indeed. She'll be.
That's awesome.
She's working hard to. She's getting close to that black belt level. So I'm not gonna miss out on that. But I will be watching. The belt test will be over in time to turn it on. Will you be down there in person, Jay?
No, I will not be going to the Eclipse Awards this year. I mean, I really enjoyed last year's ceremony. It was really a cool thing to be to have happen. But going to just enjoy it from the comfort of home this year.
Makes sense. Have you made any travel decisions about Pegasus weekend, Jonathan? Are you going to be heading down to South Florida?
Yeah, no, I think we're going to go to South Florida for the Pegasus.
Yeah, I asked that question very carefully. As you're so difficult. You just want to get those digs in at your
well, look, I mean, like I've said before, I'm a rule changer, right? I got them to move the event off of. I'm just kidding. I didn't have anything to do with that.
The statute of limitations has run out.
Yeah.
Well, I actually think I'm back eligible. So we'll see how that goes.
Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting idea. We'll a story to be followed in another podcast for sure. I will say this: a great Eclipse memory was watching you and Dave Weaver during the ceremony. I don't know, you found somewhere, you were probably just betting on your phones, but huddled at the back bar betting like quarter horses. It was a sight of degeneracy well worth beholding.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a fun time.
All right, Jay, I know you've got people coming to the house. I've got to figure out what the hell's going on in my life, but really appreciate both of you taking time out today to join us. We'll have a little bit more show left for you, basically just some closing remarks from me on the podcast feed, but we're going to leave it here for YouTube. Thank you so much, Jay and JK.
Thanks, guys.